Hey guys, and welcome to this video on what I believe may be the biggest Scrabble debacle of all time. Now, we've seen plenty of major Scrabble debacles. We've seen some absolutely ridiculous phonies get by top players. We've seen very strong players miss words that you'd think a strong player would never miss in a million years. But the reason why I think this may be the worst of them all is because it actually extended beyond the board. It extended beyond the words that were actually played during the game. And how is that possible? You guys are going to have to just watch the video to find out. Now, let's set the stage. This game was played between two very strong experts, Jesse Day and Sid Morali, at a tournament held in Las Vegas in July of 2014. You can see all of this info at the top of my screen right here where I've pointed in red. Now, the part that's going to be particularly relevant to this video is the date, and notably the year, which is 2014. And you might think at first that this would have to do something with a word list update or dictionary change, but it actually has nothing to do with that whatsoever. And the reason why 2014 is important is rather bizarre, and it'll be revealed later in this video. Now, with all that in mind, let's take a look at the board. It's pretty late in the game. In fact, the bag is already empty, and both Jesse and Sid have exactly 7 tiles on their rack. It's Jesse's turn. He's up 66 points by a score of 434 to 368, and he's holding a nice bingo rack of ADEEIRS. And he knows from having tracked throughout the game and the bag being completely empty that Sid's 7 tiles are AEINPTT. Now, from Jesse's perspective, he pretty much just needs to make sure that Sid can't bingo out, as with a 66-point lead, there's really no way for Sid to come back unless he bingos out, scoring a 50-point bonus and gets extra points from the tiles on Jesse's rack. So Jesse just needs to make sure Sid can't bingo out, and he'll be winning this game quite comfortably. Now, the most effective way for Jesse to make sure that Sid can't bingo out is to simply bingo out himself. And he can do that by playing the word sidereal, S-I-D-E-R-E-A-L, on the third row here to the open L in dilative. And ironically, you'd think Jesse would see that, not only because it's very high probability, but also because his opponent's name is Sid, and the word sidereal starts with the letters S-I-D. So pretty ironic that Jesse did not see sidereal, especially given his opponent. Now, with that in mind, it's still not too hard for Jesse to ensure he's going to win this game, even if he misses his bingo. Sid is indeed threatening to bingo out with the nice 9-letter word of patienter to this ER in the O column, which would score 86 points. But this is the only place Sid is threatening to bingo out, so Jesse just needs to block this and he should win easily. A play as simple as deer, D-E-E-R, for 7 points down the O column, blocks patienter and doesn't give Sid a spot for patient anywhere else on the board, so that would win for Jesse quite easily. Another idea for Jesse would be to play horizontally from the V and Vend over here with a 3 or 4-letter word, which would block Sid's outbingo of patienter and should win the game as long as Jesse doesn't give Sid a different outbingo. Jesse does need to be a little bit careful though, as if he puts an E directly next to the V right here, then he will be allowing Sid to instead bingo back with patienter down the M column. So for instance, if Jesse just plays the word V, V-E-E, which does block patienter down the O column, Sid's actually going to bingo with patienter down the M column, which will score less than on the O column as it doesn't hit a triple word score, but that would still be enough, as it turns out, for Sid to win this game by a single point. So that's probably what Jesse had in mind when he decided to make the play he made, which is the word vi from this V and Vend. So he plays vi instead of V, presumably to prevent Sid from bingoing out with patienter down the M column. And at first this seems like a very strong play. It's worth mentioning that Sid doesn't have any tiles that can hook Vi. The hooks for Vi are D, R, S, and W, none of which Sid has. So Sid doesn't have any plays down the O column hooking Vi that might bingo or score a lot of points. Sid also doesn't have any 8-letter words that would play to this E in Vi over here that Jesse just exposed. So Sid doesn't really have any threats after Vi, and Jesse is going to be threatening a big outplay on the O column, such as reeds or raised, hooking Vi next turn. So at first, Vi seems like a very strong play. But as it turns out, it's actually a disastrous mistake. While Vi is of course a word, you'll notice that Jesse has formed the invalid 2-letter word of IR in the process of making this play. So this play is actually a phony, and if Sid notices, then he can challenge it off the board bingo out with Patienter on the O column for 86 and past Jesse winning the game quite easily. So is this what happened? Well, sort of. So Sid had already seen the possibility of Patienter while he was waiting for Jesse to make his play. And Sid wasn't sure of the word, but he was very much prepared to play it as it was going to be his only legitimate chance to try to win the game. Now, after Jesse made his play of Vi, it didn't occur to Sid that such a short, innocuous-looking play could actually be a phony, so he didn't notice IR at first, and dismissed the possibility of bingoing out with Patienter and started looking elsewhere on the board to see if he might have missed a different way to out-bingo. For instance, Sid would have been looking on the top here, maybe at trying to bingo to this D, or to this L in dilative, and also looking anywhere else on the board, such as over here, to see if maybe there were some spot to play the word patient as a 7 that he might have missed. But after looking for a little while, Sid correctly concluded that there were no other out bingos, and then looked back at the bottom right and to his horror realized that Jesse had played IR. So of course, at this point, Sid was like, wait a minute, challenge! And this right here, guys, is where things start getting truly chaotic. You may remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that this debacle would, so to speak, take place not only on the board, but also off the board. We've just seen how it happened on the board, namely, all Jesse had to do to win this game was either find his out bingo of Sidereal, or failing that, make pretty much any valid play on the bottom right that blocked Sid's out bingo of Patienter. Jesse failed to do either of those things, instead making a play that contained the phony two-letter word of IR. And while Sid didn't notice immediately, he did after a decent amount of time, and at that point, as I just mentioned, Sid declared that he wanted to challenge. But as soon as Sid said he wanted to challenge, Jesse was like, wait a minute, I don't think you're allowed to challenge, since too much time has elapsed between when Jesse initially played IR and when Sid noticed and decided he wanted to challenge. So the two players called over a director or tournament official to adjudicate this dispute. Now, it's worth reminding ourselves that the bag is empty, so the fact that Jesse hasn't yet drawn his tiles is irrelevant. Earlier in the game, the rule for deciding whether or not a player can challenge is whether the person who played the word has yet drawn his or her tiles. If I play a word and my opponent thinks it might not be a word, then what I have to do is either challenge immediately or say the word hold before I draw my tiles, which prevents me from drawing my replacement tiles and allows them to think a little bit more about whether they want to challenge the word. If they don't either challenge or say hold before I draw my tiles, then they are not allowed to challenge. That's the rule earlier in the game when there are still tiles in the bag. However, once again, that does not apply here, as the bag was already empty before Jesse made his play, so there were no more tiles for Jesse to draw. Now, once the director came over and assessed the situation, the director ruled that Sid was not allowed to challenge this play, not because Jesse had already drawn tiles, of course, as we've discussed, there were no tiles for Jesse to draw, but because more than 20 seconds had passed between when Jesse made his play and when Sid declared he wanted to challenge. And according to the director, once the bag was empty, the rule for whether somebody could challenge wasn't whether their opponent had drawn tiles, of course that would be completely irrelevant, but it was whether more than 20 seconds had passed since the opponent had made their play. Now, is this the correct ruling? It turns out that it was not. And this is where the off-the-board part of the debacle that I was talking about earlier comes in. Not only did Jesse make this disastrous play of IR, but the director made an incorrect ruling and it would have affected the outcome of the game. Because if the director ruled correctly that Sid was allowed to challenge, then Jesse's play would have came off the board, Sid would have bingoed out and won the game. Of course, with Sid not being allowed to challenge, IR stayed on the board, and Sid wasn't able to bingo out, and Jesse went on to win the game quite easily. And in order to explain why this isn't the correct ruling, we're going to need to take into account something I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this video as seemingly unimportant, but something that would become very important later on, and that is the time this game was played, in particular the year 2014. So in order to understand why this matters, let's take a look at the official tournament Scrabble rules document. First, I'm going to pull up an official tournament rules document from 2012. This was the one that the director at that tournament that made the incorrect ruling was referencing. So you'll see here that this is the official tournament rules for NASPA, or the North American Scrabble Players Association, which was the sanctioning body for the event in which this game took place. And these rules were effective June 17th, 2012. So I'm going to just quickly pull up the section for holding and challenging, which is going to be the one we want to look at, and let's see what it says. So here we go. 1 to hold or challenge. When your opponent's turn ends, you may hold or challenge a play within 20 seconds or until your opponent has drawn at least one tile. Okay, that's all we need here, guys. You may hold or challenge a play within 20 seconds or until your opponent has drawn at least one tile. In this case, the second part is irrelevant because Jesse has not drawn at least one tile. There are no tiles at all for Jesse to draw. So therefore, the first part applies here. You may hold or challenge a play within 20 seconds. Sid did not hold or challenge within 20 seconds. It was more than 20 seconds between when Jesse made his play and when Sid said he was challenging, and as such, according to this sentence right here, it was ruled that Sid was not allowed to challenge. Now, based on this and this alone, that would have been the correct ruling. However, the rules were updated in 2013. So here, guys, I have another document. It's the same NASPA official tournament rules, but it's a new version revised in September of 2013 and effective just a couple weeks later. Now, once again, this game took place in July of 2014. So the version of the rules that was effective in 2013 would have superseded the version of the rules that was effective in 2012, and in fact, this was the most recent version of the rules that was published at the time of that tournament, and this is what should have been used. So now, let's look at the section on holding and challenging in this document. If we go to that same section, over here, we'll notice that it's underlined, which indicates that NASPA has changed the rule since the last update. And let's read what it says here. So the first sentence isn't relevant to our situation. When your opponent's turn ends, you may hold or challenge a play until your opponent has drawn at least one tile. So that doesn't apply here since Jesse hasn't drawn one tile. But let's look at the last sentence here, guys. Once the tile bag is empty and there are no tiles to be drawn, but before the game has ended, there is no, in capital letters, no time limit for holding or challenging a play. There are separate rules concerning the final play of the game. That also doesn't apply here as Vi was not the final play of the game. Sid's out bingo or Jesse's outplay would have been the final play of the game. So again, the sentence that matters here, once the tile bag is empty and there are no tiles to be drawn, but before the game has ended, there is no time limit for holding or challenging a play. This is in stark contrast to the rules that were in effect a year earlier that said you may hold or challenge a play within 20 seconds. Now, there is explicitly no time limit. And once again, this version I have up on my screen right now is the version that was in effect at the time of the tournament. However, the director incorrectly used the outdated version, which was outdated by over a year as of 2014, and made the incorrect ruling, which ended up adversely affecting the outcome of this game. So there you have it, guys. That is why I feel like this is one of the worst, if not arguably the worst, Scrabble debacle of all time, since it involved not only an absolutely crazy mistake on the board by a top player, but also a pretty egregious misruling by a director that was not only egregious in that it was completely obvious why it was a misruling, it was egregious in that it actually would have affected the outcome of the game. So a pretty wild sequence of events, and definitely an unfortunate one, especially for Sid. But there you have it, guys. That is it for this video. So once again, this is what I believe may be the biggest debacle in Scrabble history. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, that's it for this one. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.